15% of all adults, about 13 to 15% of young people in detention identify as LGBTQI.
I see.
And
I feel like some of that's probably due to.
and maybe
probably got something to do with it.
I mean, I'm part of the community.
well, here's the thing. Again, there is a certain percentage of the populace that looks down on the LGBTQ plus community.
A lot of people actually do, and it's honestly surprising because you don't see that as much anymore.
And so, again, these judges, which still to this day, for the most part, tend to be older white guys, tend to penalize not just the crime, but the person based on what they see. And that isn't fair. We need to remove that from our justice system. Complicating the issue is, and I don't know about men's prisoners, but I've heard plenty of female prisoners talk about how in prison, a girl might take up with another girl that would never do it out on the streets. And they call it being gay for the stay. And so I don't know where you put that in that LGBTQ plus, whether that's kind of bi, but
I honestly don't know.
But again, it's a complicated issue. It's a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
And all I can say is that I am very proud of the things I have done. Back when I was a stand-up comic, I worked a couple of prides. I'm very proud of all that, of all the charity work I've done for the LGBTQ plus community. I was on the LGBTQ plus board in Merced, so I'm very proud of that. And I will stand up for my gay brethren and sistren no matter what.
Gay, lesbian, bi, pan, omni, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Well, what a great set of facts, Krista.
It was a good set of facts. You did well.
Thank you. I also did do good on some of those big words.
You did very good. I'm very proud of you. So let's run our timeline real quick.
As you should.
1831. That's when Missouri Governor Miller suggested that a penitentiary be built in Jeff City. Basically, at the time, he was worried that St. Louis might one day get looked at as a better option for the capital because it was growing faster and had a lot more businesses and stuff. So he thought that, the more that they could concentrate state facilities in Jefferson City, the more it would help it maintain as a capital. Now, I don't think there'd be any reason people look elsewhere for a capital. That's where everything is. In 1833, the Missouri House of Representatives passes a measure approving the construction of a penitentiary in Jefferson City. Now, you got to remember, at that time, everything was the Auburn system. So, people were kept in darkness quite a bit. They were fed whatever they could find, and I mean, a lot of their food had maggots in it and whatever, and it was
I'm
not.
sorry for the people that are eating while listening to this podcast.
In 1834, the construction begins on the penitentiary, the first state penitentiary west of the Mississippi River. In 1836, Wilson Eidson is the first inmate coming from Greene County. In 1840, early prison laborers are building houses in Jeff City, accompanied by armed guards. Many of those houses still stand today.
Wow.
In 1842, the first female inmate, Amelia Eddy, arrives from St. Louis County. Now, they did not have a fully female prison yet, so women were segregated from the male population, but they didn't have their own building.
I see.
In 1868, Housing Unit 4, which everyone calls A Hall, is completed from stone quarried on the site by the prisoners themselves to house post-Civil War criminals. A Hall is the second oldest building existing on the MSP site. So, now, and A Hall is actually the oldest one that they will let you in, because the oldest one is actually the Centennial cells, and we'll talk about more of them later.
Yeah, because they're creepy and unused. Ooh.
In 1885, inmate labor is used in local factories in Jeff City, including 4 different shoe factories and a saddle tree factory, which saddle tree basically makes the wooden saddle frame that later gets covered with leather. But yeah, this also improves the local economy because all these businesses are basically getting these laborers for next to nothing. And that money is what money it is getting is supposed to be going to the state.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, in 1893, MSP is considered one of the most efficient penitentiaries in the country, housing and feeding prisoners for 11 cents a day.
Woo. That's impressive.
Yes, but you got to remember,
11 cents was probably quite a bit of money still in the 1850s.
Right. Again, I go back to this slide presentation I saw in high school when right around that time.
Wow, you remember that far back?
I do remember that far back, but right around that time, they were showing a woman saying, "I don't know if we can afford, we can eat here. The steak here is 25 cents." So, right. So 11 cents a day is probably fairly expensive under those conditions, but it sounds like very little. Today's economy, it'd probably be like $20 a day.
Yeah. Or 10 even.
Yeah, maybe.
I could probably actually look it up. Hold on. Would you say the date was 1850?
1893.
1893. Okay.
Yeah. While you're looking that up, I will.
I'm going to research that real quick.
In 1900, the Jefferson City Star declares Missouri State Penitentiary the greatest in the world, as the prison has then an average of 2,200 prisoners living behind its walls. So it's starting to get overcrowded in the 1900s. 1905, Housing Unit 1, which it currently serves as the entrance to Missouri State Penitentiary, is finished. It houses famous female prisoners, including Emma Goldman and Kate O'Hare, as well as non-famous female prisoners. And I don't have names because, well, they're not famous. In 1909, inmates were no longer required to wear the black and white zebra-striped suits. This was greeted with much enthusiasm by the inmates. At that point, basically, they were in gray sweatpants and white shirts. That was their look. In 1911, on February 5th, Missouri State Penitentiary inmates saved thousands of documents when the Missouri State Capitol was destroyed by fire. And I'm not sure how they did that. I don't know if they were fighting the fire and just saw the documents and put them out, or if they had to go through the boxes afterwards and figure out what was still remaining as opposed to just throwing them out. So I'm not sure how they saved the documents, but they're credited with doing so on February 5th of 1911. In 1914, Housing Unit 3 is constructed. It is used as a housing unit, an administrative segregation unit, and a capital punishment unit until 1989. The 1954 riot ends there.
Yeah.
Now, have you reached your conclusion yet, my dear?
So, we're talking about 11 cents. The closest I can find is $1 from 1890 is equal to $30.06. So, as 10 cents would be 10% of $1, you're probably looking about $3.06 a day in feeding.
That's Wow, that's not much at all.
Right.
That's the sort of model that Arizona is going for, or was for a time. All right, in
1925.
Infamous inmate Charles Arthur Pretty Boy Floyd arrives, gangster and bank robber there.
Gangster and bad mamma jamma as he was.
In 1935, according to the Department of Justice, Missouri State Penitentiary is housing 5,300 inmates, so it's quite crowded.
Just a smidge.
Yeah, and you got to remember, like places like A-Hall, those cells were not much bigger than closets. So,
right, and they're putting 2 or 3 people in each one.
Sometimes 5 and 6. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Well, when you're in prison and you got to make every inch of space count, that you got to do what you got to do, I guess.
Right. In 1937, the gas chamber is delivered to Missouri State Penitentiary, and it's placed on a cement pad. Prisoners quarry stone from the prison quarry, and the building is built around the cement pad.
Okay, so that must have been an interesting job to be assigned. So you see, what we're going to have you do here is we're going to have you dig up some rocks, and you're going to shape these rocks, and then you're going to make a wall, and we're going to surround this big room, and then, Joe Bob, we're going to put you in a chair, and we're going to send you to meet your maker.
See, I don't think they let the prisoners who were due for the execution work on the place they had the execution.
I don't know. I feel like that would be a thing they would do.
Well, years ago, there was a prison in Kansas, or a jail in Kansas, I don't remember which, that had a bunch of work done.
Uh-huh.
And when people, they delayed the final paycheck from the day the prison was finished to a couple weeks later. So these guys had to go back to the jail to get their final paycheck.
Uh-huh.
At that point, they were asked to show their identification papers, and if they couldn't, they arrested them. And supposedly, and I don't know how true this is, but supposedly they got a bunch of illegal aliens that way. And I feel like that's kind of a dirty trick, but whatever.
Oh, I mean, you know.
So, based on that, yeah, you're right. But I honestly think that they're probably a little smarter than that. And they're like, if we let Joe Bob work on the new gas chamber, Joe Bob might mess it up. And we're planning on putting Joe Bob in it. Joe Bob can go do something else. Joe Bob can go help make shoes or something.
Uh-huh. Joe Bob. Poor Joe Bob. I hope Joe Bob actually did something bad and isn't just doing time.
Right. Now,
a neighbor killing his wife.
This becomes the location of 40 executions, most of them in the gas chamber. In 1938, plans to develop a hospital on site comes to fruition. Actually, it was just across the street. A modern 5-story building opens with 240 beds and medical files on every inmate. And at the time, it was state of the art. Now, that hospital no longer stands. Once the prison closed down, the federal judges were looking for a building, and they realized if they had that site, they would have a view of the river. And so they decided they wanted that site, but they didn't want the building. So they tore that building down, built a new one. But according to Melanie, that building is still pretty haunted, according to some of the office workers and people who work in it.
Well, cool, I think. That would be cool, right? Yeah. Sure.
In 1950, Charles Liston, a.k.a. Sonny, enters Missouri State Penitentiary as an inmate. He learns to box there, and upon his release, goes on to win the National Boxing Championship. And I think he lost it to Muhammad Ali, or a.k.a. Cassius Clay, but I'm not sure what his name was at the time.
I see.
In 1954, a major riot occurs, which focuses national attention on Missouri State Penitentiary. In 1967, Time magazine calls MSP, the bloodiest 47 acres in America.